Hello, everyone. As you might have been following me for a little while, you may have noticed I've been doing some videos um, of Magnus Carlsen playing the black side of the Scandinavian defense. So now we are going to do a video of Magnus Carlsen playing the white side, so against the Scandinavian, and see how he does. This is going to be a compilation video, and since that Magnus doesn't have many games playing against the Scandinavian from the white side, many GMs, of course, don't really have this in their repertoire. So if it is used against him, it's used in as a surprise weapon in classical format, or as a surprise again in blitz or rapid. So let's start looking right away. So first of all, again, please hit the subscribe button and the thumbs up button and support my channel by checking the links below. Um, all right, the first game we're gonna look at is from the Vikings tournament in 2010. Magnus Carlsen, 2,800 at the time, with the white pieces going against Nigel Short, British Grandmaster, and this is a classical game here. And the game started e4, d5, of course, by Nigel. E takes d5, and now the knight f6 variation of the Scandinavian. Uh, this variation kind of is more of a true gambit, or can be played as a true gambit, since you're not capturing the pawn right away with black. This variation can be a little more dynamic in that you're willing to sacrifice some material uh, in order to gain initiative. For instance, some beginning players will sometimes try to hold on to this pawn, and this is a fantastic way to play against that c6. And then you get in a lot of trouble here trying to get to this d4 square eventually. So for instance, knight f3, e5, and black has a good game here. It's very difficult um, for white to really unravel. Um, Meanwhile, black's play flows rather naturally, and he has full compensation for the pawn here. As we discussed in the other videos, some of the main, I guess, drawbacks of the Scandinavian from the black side is just that um, white will, with proper play, be able to enjoy a space advantage, and uh, he will often be able to gain time either on black's queen or black's knight just by eventually playing c4 at some point after the uh, pawn is recaptured by the queen or the knight. Now, of course, on the black side, what one of the greatest things about the Scandinavian is that you kind of take control of the opening and bring it into your channels, just like from the very beginning of the opening. By playing d5, the opponent is forced, at least if the opponent wants a chance at advantage, the opponent is pretty much forced to capture. So he has to go into your lines. Of course, he can play unorthodox and try to avoid this by playing, say, d4, transposing into a black Mardima territory, but that's not really going to give white any chances at an advantage. The theoretical way for the advantage is to capture. So here Nigel Short goes in for this knight f6 variation. Magnus plays d4, bishop g4, and then Carlsen just plays knight f3. Um, F3 is playable, but has its drawbacks also, as it takes away the natural square from the knight, weakens the king side somewhat, and it's also just not a developing move, but it's playable. So Magnus opts for knight f3 here, and now finally the capture takes place. Knight takes d5, queen takes d5 is possible. H3, and we see here Magnus is playing real like straightforward and simple. He just wants to simply set up a situation where he plays c4 and he just gets a space advantage and has his two bishops. Notice black structure. It's a Yaroslav structure. whereby the important breaks for black is to obtain is, either c5 or e5. If he can get those breaks, he usually can have a pleasant game. If he doesn't get those breaks in, he usually will have a very unpleasant game and a hard task defending the position. Knight c7, and notice how I was talking about earlier with the c4. So eventually you do wind up losing time. So you can see this is the type of position that white is striving for. He obtains the space advantage, pawn preponderance in the center, and in this case he has the two bishops. And black really has to kind of sit and wait and try to counterattack. Okay, at this point, he doesn't have too many prospects. He kind of has to wait for white to kind of lose the threat on the position. And these are similar themes that you might see in the Caro-Kann or sometimes a Slav defense. Nigel plays f5, queen e3, king h8, knight to c3, knight d7, and Magnus decides he's going to fianchetto the bishop, and now f4. So that eliminates the e5 break altogether here. Remember, in these Caro-Slav structures, and you're black, you want to get c5 or e5, and preferably e5, but it's usually harder to get the e5 break in because of the pressure down the e file. So normally you'll see c5 being played, but the timing has to be right, because oftentimes if you mistime it, you can either lose a pawn or white can simply just bypass with d5. Knight d7 here, b3, and let's say, for example, black makes a mistake and tries to get this break in, just to show you. Notice how the rook is sitting here on d1 and the queen is here. So already you can't really afford to capture the pawn. So he has to prepare e5. But soon now that he's ready, Magnus puts the clamps on the position. Queen f7, bishop e2, rook a d8. Notice how the queen right here keeps an eye on c5. Bishop f3. This makes it also hard to get c5 in, because now you have to worry about that pawn on b7. Bishop f6. So Magnus is playing like a game of restriction and constriction. So he's restricting black's possibilities, and then he's slowly squeezing black in the position. Rook d2, queen g7, rook a d1, and now g5, because the e5 break and c5 break are out of the question. So black has to take some chances or he's going to be crushed here. White has the advantage in this position. All right, so therefore Nigel decides to break with g5 to undermine this stronghold against the e5 push. So g5, Nigel plays, Carlsen plays knight e2, and now rook g8. If he tries to capture here, which of course he could, this is good for white also. This threat here is devastating. And again, he still doesn't have time to play the move that he would like to play in e5, because simply d takes e5, knight takes e5, and again, notice the doubling up of the rooks. Of course, you could throw it like this in between move in there. Doesn't matter. And white is just winning in this position. So rook g8, king f1. Magnus decides to get off the file. h6, which doesn't really do anything. It's kind of like a waiting move. Again, black is in some trouble here, but he's just holding on in the position. Knight g3, threat to the f5 pawn. So queen g6 and queen d3, more pressure there. And this actually works out for Nigel, right? Him taking these chances. Better here is probably just rook e1 straight away. Or even perhaps knight h5 with the eye on this bishop right here. So for example, g takes, then you have knight takes f4 hitting the queen, queen g5, rook e1, c5. Again, that break is important. D takes e5, bishop takes, rook takes, and e5. Notice that in this case, c5 is sacrificed in order to free the e5 pawn. Knight d5, f4. And this is, again, this is just an example. But as you can see, white has the advantage here still. Okay. He has a 4-2 pawn majority on the king side. Queen is lined up on the beautiful diagonal. The knight outpost is pretty much unassailable unless white wants to, black wants to connect these pawns. Play can continue knight e6, b4, protecting. It's right here, knight d4, rook d2. Again, a5 trying to undermine this, but then simply a3. So that's just an example to show that white can play knight h5 and keep the advantage. Instead, Carlsen played queen d3, which looks reasonable enough as it puts more pressure here. But this gave Nigel Short an opportunity, so he played g takes here. Right, grabs the pawn, the knight must move. And of course, Magnus had this in mind, right? He's threatening the bishop here and threatening to come here with the knight. But knight c5, some tactical problems with the move queen d3. Now the queen is here, lined up with the rook. This allows black to free himself somewhat. So queen c2. Now knight e4. Rook e2. Knight g3. Knight takes, f takes. So now this bishop still lives, right? Instead of being captured, just by that simple transition of queen d3. So queen d3 was a mistake. Black capitalized on it and was able to get closer to equality here. So d5 by Magnus, c takes d5. C takes d5, and now black's chances don't look so dim here, as this isolated pawn of white is easier for black to stop. So some trades, bishop takes, queen takes b2 check, queen g7, offering the trade of queens, rook d7 by Nigel, rook e1, rook f8, and now rook e5 here, knight b5, queen c5 by Magnus, knight d6, queen takes a7, knight e4, and black has enough activity to actually draw the game, which Nigel did. There's a few more exchanges, and although his pawns are a little suspect, black is active enough, and the game ended after 47, rook e4. So nice instructional game by both sides. You saw how white could gain the advantage, but then you saw that black was able to, just muster up enough counterplay after some missteps by white in order to secure the draw. But I tell you, that's a position that I would not want to be in. Black really had no chances, and it took, some enterprising play from black. Specifically the plan with g5, right? He had to take some chances in order to not go right into just a straight up lost position. And him taking the chances, and then Magnus making that error with queen d3, allowed him to gain just enough counterplay to turn things around and secure the draw. The next game uh, took place at the 41st Chess Olympiad in 2014. Magnus Carlsen, rated 2877 at the time, going against Grandmaster Jukic, who was rated 2521. So again, e4, d5, e takes, in this time, instead of knight f6, we see the classical variation in queen takes d5, knight c3, and there's three different moves that can be played here. One is queen a5. That's the most common variation, or the most old school classical variation. There's queen d6, favored by grandmaster and specialist in this variation, Sergei Tivyakov. And there's the insipid queen d8, which is basically equivalent to giving move odds to your opponent. So queen d8 was played by Jukic. And again, it's like giving your opponent an extra move, because just imagine if this was the starting position, and now you get to play d4. So not only do you get to move your knight out, but you also get to play d4. So basically, you're giving an extra move to the world champion, a future world champion at this point, right? So knight f6, knight f3, bishop g4. So of course, giving away moves, black has to hurry up in his development. And he immediately enters into the familiar pawn structure of the Yaroslav structure with e6 coming up. And again, black is going to face the same problems he always faces in these type of situations. White is going to have space and a preponderance in the center, and it's going to be up to black to try to create some counterplay, right? Prove the center is a liability, or at least cause white to make some mistakes by putting enough pressure on him to justify his opening play. Here, Magnus plays very conservative. He has two bishops, his space, and he's just gonna build his position. He's not gonna take any chances and try to refute black out of the opening. Game continues, both sides castle, and okay, black has a typical position. Again, space in the center. That's white's two trump cards. Space being long-term advantage in having control of the center. So these are things that black must deal with. So he's going to try to start working on these breaks here. D1. Again, as in any Yaroslav situation, you want either C5 or E5 breaks here. Again, just to give you an example, if C5 right now, this is why you always have to be tactically alert. If C5 right now, right, this is a move strategically black wants to have, but knight B5, that's no good. Takes, bishop takes B7, and then you're already a pawn down. The game continue. Rook A D8. You have to build up the position. B3. And now rook Fe8. Bishop B2 by Magnus. Now Magnus is playing very slowly here. Okay? He has no advantage in the position. Black is equalized. He basically let black do what he wants to do, exactly what he wants to do here. A6. And remember what I was telling you about the break. C5. So now the breaks are ready. Right? Now there is no more knight B5 possibility here. So Magnus plays knight E2. Magnus doesn't really do anything to stop these breaks here. So Jukic just plays the best break available on the board, which is simply E5, C4, and he's perfectly equal here. So for the record, black has equalized. Yes, white has a slight space advantage as he occupies the first 4 ranks, but after bishop C5, queen E2, C5, now you can see that now black occupies the first 4 ranks also on his side of the board, and the game couldn't go any more smoothly for black. But game's not over yet. Knight f3, bishop takes b2, queen takes b2. Again, it's still equal. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? Right? You have a perfectly symmetrical chess position, but again, it's Magnus Carlsen, and he is the master of outplaying grandmasters from seemingly equal positions. Knight g6. Magnus keeps the pieces on the board, even though he could have damaged the black pawn structure a little bit by playing knight takes g6. He just keeps probing the position. There's all types of ideas on this diagonal, right? You know, this knight can't really move too much. You might have threats down the road. Knight takes g7. Maybe this check. So keeping the pieces on the board, uh, you know, creates pressure on the opponent. Right? It's something they have to think about. It's an additional threat, right? You have the piece advance up the board like this. Now black has to worry about it. Also, this bishop is very powerful on this diagonal. Knight e7, so of course he wants to get rid of that piece. Knight jumps back to e3. And now b6. Good move strategically, getting the pawns off of the same color as the bishop. b4. Knight c6. I like that move. And now rook takes d8. Rook takes d8. And now rook b1. So now Magnus is presenting some problems because now he wants to break open the position. Let's really penetrate. So what is he going to do? Again, putting that pressure on Grandmaster Jukic. Jukic decides to play c takes b4. And after a takes b4, right now you have to deal with this idea, right? Maybe down the road he could get a pass pawn, right? And maybe that's what he was thinking, that he liked that prospect. But white also has the same kind of thing in his mind. But the downside of that is after knight e5, queen c3, rook d3, queen a1. Now you have this pawn under attack here. And say, for example, knight takes c4, then just rook c1. And if b5, then queen takes a6, and that's better for white. So going back, instead of c takes b4, better would be rook b8, maintaining the tension. Keeping things symmetrical. If knight d5, you just capture. Okay, now you have bishop versus knight, but this is not too bad because this knight has a square to go to. Queen c2, knight e7, bishop g2, rook d8, rook e1. The game is pretty close to equality here. The c takes b1, a takes b4. Black try to get active, and it looks pretty good, right? His pieces are in the center. He's attacking, but things just seem to unravel for black, especially after this move, h5. So his queen takes a6. Now h4, g4, rook d2, and it looks like black is going to have some type of compensation for his pawn deficit, but he just doesn't. And Magnus just creates a pass pawn himself. And just nice technique by Magnus. And he proves to black that he has no attack. And at this point, black was just lost. And after a few accurate moves by Magnus, nice move here. Of course, the knight cannot capture because the pawn would just promote. And Jukic resigned. So again, see Magnus with the same technique. He gets the space advantage, and he has his pawn preponderance in the center. In that game, hey, black was totally equal, so he just got outplayed. So again, we can't really knock the opening there. However, we can criticize white's opening because he definitely wasn't playing for an advantage in the opening. You can see that. So, but black did equalize there. This next game was a blitz game, 2016, between Magnus Carlsen and TL Petrosian, who's 26, 11 at the time. So in this game, I'm going to go through it quickly because it was only a 1 minute blitz game with 1 minute increment. So E takes D5, queen takes, knight C3, and now Petrosian played queen D6, D4, knight F6, G6 variation, knight B5, queen D8. This is why sometimes C6 is played earlier to try to avoid that knight B5 line. C3 and now C6. Again, black equalizes. Remember, this is just a 1-minute game. And black is equal at this point. Again, Slav structure with the same themes. You want to get, if you're black, you want to play C5 and E5 breaks to free your position. You can also reach this position from certain variations in Alekhon's defense also. Knight B6. Again, the cramp side wants to trade off pieces. Magnus is avoiding that. Bishop E6. Rook E1. A good alternative here is definitely knight G5. But again, this is a fast game, so I don't want to criticize it too much. Now he plays knight G5, but the bishop's not on E6 anymore, so it doesn't have the same effect. Again, the fight to get rid of the piece at E5, and also having that lurking in the background. C4, knight takes E5, D takes E5. This is good for black now, and here black just picks up a pawn after playing bishop takes C4. Correct. Here, in maintaining equality for white would have been, instead of capturing the knight, it's capture the bishop. And play, the bishop has to move, right? I mean, the knight has to move from E5. So let's say the C4, and D takes, B takes, knight F3, queen D5, B3, kicking the knight again. Knight D6 and bishop B2 is a sample line where there's chances for both sides, although I like white a little bit better due to the bishop pair, okay, and the weakness of that pawn on C6. Instead, Magnus played D takes E5, so Petrosian just ended up the pawn up. Traded down. So here we have to say black is better. It's not like white has some kind of compensation for the pawn deficit. Bishop F4, and he's attacking the weak pawn. And now rook A D8, oversight by black. Again, it's just a 1-minute game, but a simple move like H6 is good, kicking the knight out. Or I think I like even better. Perhaps is offering the trade of queens. Queen C4. Attacking the bishop and the queen at the same time. It's probably even safer. Instead, he did rook A D8. This allowed Magnus to reach into his bag of tricks and play the move E6. Why not? You have a weak pawn that's being attacked, so why not use it for something? So knight F7 now. Rook D8. So now the rook is passive, and now black can't possibly claim any advantage, even though he is up a pawn. All right, with his pieces looking like that. Game continued H4, so Magnus went on the attack. And now he offers the queen trade, and it's kind of like, too late for that. Magnus is not gonna do that. Queen F3, knight D5. Rook comes to E4, hitting the queen, queen B5. He ignores the B2 pawn, and he presses on with his attack. Queen takes B2, which to me is a little bit on the greedy side. Why not knight takes F4 here? Again, I understand it's just a minute game though. But knight takes F4 seems obvious to me. And let's say queen takes, and then you just grab this pawn. I mean, I would see that in a minute game, but anyway, queen takes B2, rook A1. He took another pawn, so greed was paramount here. The queen side is busted open. Okay, he gives up the exchange. That was a smart move, but he comes under tremendous pressure here. Bishop D6, queen D2, and this is a lot of pressure to deal with in the speed game. I mean, even though black might have been justified in, say, like a slow game, taking all of those pawns in a minute game is very difficult to defend these type of positions, because you make one mistake and it's over. All right. So here, um, black, yeah, technically is winning, but who knows what the time situation was, and again, it just takes one mistake. So for example, like here, um, black made a, you know, automatic looking move and played the move a3, where really what he needed to do was play king f7 to keep the queen from penetrating into the g6 square. But of course, hard to see that with everything on the line. And Magnus gives up his rook, and after king h2, uh, the game is pretty much over. Magnus wind up winning this game. I'm sure, um, the rest of the moves weren't recorded because of the speed of the game. But I don't really see how um, white can really deal, black can really deal with this, the threats here. Okay, so after this bishop is captured, so I'm gonna say he resigned. Here's another game from, this is a classical game from Tata Steel. All right, so with the black pieces here is um, Baskaran Adaban, who's 2655, and of course Carlsen, um, with the white pieces again, 2840 at this time. This is from Tata Steel again, but 2017. So e4, d5, e takes d5, knight f6. Again, we saw this variation earlier. Magnus just plays classically knight takes d5, d4, bishop g4, h3. So immediately trying to secure the bishop pair. It's a formula that Magnus has been sticking to. But here, Adaban just plays the bishop back to h5. And now knight c6. So we can see here too that Adaban is playing a little different here, as he avoids that typical Yaroslav structure by playing c6, e6, etc. But he's playing for more piece activity, a la Shigorin's defense, if you will. And here Magnus just castles, e6, and he plays this move c3, protecting d4. So I'm not gonna say Magnus was unprepared or didn't know, but I mean c4 is definitely the principal move in this position. If white is really going to try to chop black's head off here, nice c4. I'm sorry, c4 definitely should be played here if white is definitely trying to put maximum pressure and create winning chances in the position. I do understand that there's going to be pressure against this d pawn, and black will definitely try to prove that white center is weak. But this is the challenge that you have to be up for here if you're gonna try to go for an advantage. After c3, it's yes, it's more of a defensive move than anything. This allows black to equalize. So bishop e7, and now knight e5. And again, I think that again, Carlsen was just playing to just get a reasonable opening and outplay his opponents later on, and wasn't really trying to go for an advantage. So knight takes e5 was played, bishop takes e5, knight g6. This allows Magnus to obtain the two bishops. For this reason, I like the move bishop takes first. Queen e2, knight takes d5, d takes, and now c6. Again, this is a position related to Alakhan's defense. This is a good position, equal position for white here. Play could go for black. Play could go rook d1, queen c7, and let us say c4, knight b6, and black is perfectly fine. Of course, this knight will reroute to d7 with additional pressure on this pawn right here. After knight e5, um, black doesn't get to trade off the other piece, and usually the one in the cramped position would like to trade opposed to the one. Okay, so after bishop takes h5, the knight has to move again, and black is still cramped, but white is able to keep one extra set of pieces on the board. So after knight g6, queen g3. So probing, rook b8, and now c4. Knight f6, and of course now white's hand is forced because this pawn is under attack. So now bishop takes, h takes, and now queen a4 check, c6, and queen takes a7. So you might be saying, wait a minute, it looks like Magnus got what he wanted. He has more space. He has the control of the center. Well, at least not e4, but he has a pawn preponderance in the center, and he's up material, right? After all, okay, he's up a pawn. However, black has an ace up his sleeve, which is called dynamism right here. And he has an open H file. So the rook is already developed. So don't even think that black is not developed. The rook is already developed. He has bishop on a nice diagonal. And white is behind in development. It's these factors combined that allow black to find initiative. Now, it's white's duty to kind of quench any initiative that black might be trying to develop or compensation for the loss of material. We see Carlsen trying to do that now, basically trying to consolidate, get the rest of his pieces out, and then he should have a fine game. Like here, we could say that black has some compensation, but not really enough. I mean, I would take white here. So bishop c7. And again, this is like primitive strategy here. Simple. Queen d6, just making a note of the fact that there's no knight here on f3 to protect the h2 square. So basically, his bishop just comes back, queen here, and at the very least, it will cause Magnus to weaken his position. So now rook d1, queen d6, g3. See, there it is. So with g3, king side is weakened. This pawn is now up for grabs. Now queen d7. Now, if rook takes h3, then simply bishop f4. All right, and that leads to some trade-offs that are favorable for white. Right, he can stop the attack. So after g3 provoking the weakness, queen d7 is played. And of course, now if bishop f4, then bishop just simply bishop takes. So h4, protecting the pawn. But again, black is starting to gain some momentum and form of compensation with this weakened king side. Castles, queen c5, and now b5 from Adiban. C takes, and now here a3 by Magnus, another move that's sort of passive. Rook fc8, and now you have to deal with, discovered ideas from black. So queen g5, b4, and notice how Adiban just keeps pushing on in the position. He's down a pawn, but he has compensation because of his activity. Think of this as like almost like a Benko Gambit type of position. And you have all this activity from black on the queen side, namely the A and B files in the Benko. But here's a very similar approach, where yes, white is up a pawn, but it's very difficult for him to realize that advantage without somehow compromising his position. Queen d2, bishop b6. So now there's pressure on the d pawn. Knight e2, rook bc4. So notice how white's pieces are being forced into awkward positions in order to protect the pawns, and black's pieces just keep improving their positions. Queen d3, and now Adiban decides to play e5 here. Another idea is queen d5. Another idea is knight g4, followed by queen d5. So e5 was played, and here Carlsen played bishop g5. D takes e5 is possible. Queen takes, rook takes, and now knight g4. And this kind of helps White's cause some, as the queens are now off the board. So let's say, for example, rook c3, bishop takes f2. And if White tries to protect the pawn, say like with say rook f3, for example, again, just the activity of black is just too much. So like rook c2, let's make another mistake here. Let's play a move like king f1, and you have knight h2, check, and a fork. And that's just to show you the type of activity that black has at its disposal. So Carlsen, again, trying to get his pieces in the game, plays bishop g5, although it might have been a little safer to play queen d3. D takes e5 in order to facilitate the exchange of queens. But bishop g5 is played, knight g4, rook ac1, rooks come off, and now rook e8, rook d1, e takes, bishop f4, and now black has gained his pawn back. And what I like about the way black gained his pawn back was that he didn't just go after the pawn, but he put so much pressure on the Magnus Carlsen's position that he kind of was forced to give back the pawn. Game continued. With this battle, and finally black initiates the queen trade. More pieces come off. Notice how Adiban places his pawns on the opposite color of his bishop. That's a nice lesson. And the game eventually dwindled down to a draw here after bishop takes b2. So nice draw, classical game against Magnus Carlsen in the knight of 6 variation of the Scandinavian. Our final game will be from the World Rapid in 2019. Magnus Carlsen, world champion with the white pieces, rated 2872 in Rapid, versus a player named Yuta Galiev, 2502 with the black pieces. We're going to go through this quickly. So after e4, d5, e takes d5, back to our traditional variation with queen takes, knight c3, hitting the queen, and now queen d6. d4, c6, knight f3, knight f6, knight e5, and now this variation is related to the same variation in the Slav. There's a similar variation where the knight comes to e5 early, and then after knight bd7, then knight c4, queen drops back. So very similar play here, although it's from a different opening. The Slav, the Karakan, Scandinavian, Alakan defense, you can get similar positions with the same structure. a4, a5, queen f3, knight b6, bishop f4, and notice how skillfully Magnus tries to avoid these trades. You know, being the one with more space, he wants to avoid trades, so he has more pieces to attack. All right, bishop e5, knight bd5. Of course, black doesn't take here. That would be like a rookie move, just facilitating the development of white. So instead, he plays knight bd5, and now Carlsen Carlsen could have continued and played bishop d3 here, which I prefer. Instead, he went and played knight takes d5, knight takes d5, and he played c3. Not the strongest continuation. Knight f6, bishop d3 now, bishop e6 castles, bishop takes c4. I don't know why black did that, but bishop takes c4. So now, again, what's up with these grandmasters giving Magnus the two bishops so easily, just handing them over? Remember what I say about these structures? If you're black, you need to get in e6 or c5 usually. Here, e6 is pretty much impossible. I'm sorry, e5 is pretty much impossible to obtain. So this is why c5 is usually the move. Queen g3, putting pressure, right, on this square, making it hard to get in move like c5. c5, either bishop b5 check, very devastating move, or just simply bishop c7, followed by bishop b5 check. So this is, again, you should not be so quick to give up the two bishops. So g6, f4, furthermore killing the e5 idea, bishop g7, and now f5. This is very dangerous for black because of course he can't take here. He plays e takes f5, but again, watch how Magnus uses the bishop here. Bishop c7. So now he's attacking the queen. King still in the middle of the board. Queen c8, and now queen d6. Devastating. Now you can't castle. Black tries to block things up with knight e4, but he gets pinned. Rook a1. Rook ae1, sorry. Queen d7. Magnus just gives up the exchange. Rook takes d7. Easy money right here. F takes e4. Bishop takes f7 check. Queen takes f7. Rook takes. King takes. Queen d7. Boom. Resign. Game over. I hope you enjoyed that video of Magnus Carlsen versus the Scandinavian. Um, what can I say in conclusion about it? Is the Scandinavian good? Is Scandinavian bad? I think, again, at the top, very top levels, again, it doesn't have the stellar reputation. But as you saw by some of the games, you saw Magnus classical games against Nigel Short, Adaban, good strong grandmasters, and he wasn't able to win those games. Although he did at certain points have superior positions. It seemed in the other games, the Rapids and the Blitz games, he was kind of caught off surprise, or he was taking the approach that he would just get to a reasonable position and outplay his opponents, which he did in certain games. So is the Scandinavian good enough to play for the average person? Definitely. It's definitely an opening you should have in your repertoire. Definitely play the knight f6 variation that allows for you to play dynamically and aggressively if that's your style. Also, the themes of the Scandinavian are very easy to learn, right? Getting the pieces out quickly and efficiently, looking for the c5 or e5 break, and you can learn a whole lot about the Yaroslav structure in general also, which is great chess education. I'm impressed by studying these games because, yes, Magnus did win, of most of his games, of course, but you could see that clearly he was just a stronger player in most occasions. It wasn't like he was just beating these guys out of the opening, right? He was just overwhelming them, just being strong, and we could say he probably would have won no matter what the opening was, at this rate of, a percentage of victory. So, with that said, I give my stamp of approval to the Scandinavian as a definitely a legit opening, and I hope to see it being played more from time to time, even if it's just in a rapid and blitz format, because I know once the engines and Alpha Zero get a hold of it, it probably dismantle it and probably show some devastating lines that um, prove that it really shouldn't be played in classical games or match settings. Because after all, you must ask yourself this question: if D5 is sound, then E4 is no good. So at the end of the day, if we do believe in the classical chess theory, D5 must have some demerits to it. And I'll go as far to say that the demerits would be the lack of space, right? And also, giving up time in the opening. So the question is that enough for white to win and claim a decisive advantage? So that's for you guys to comment about and debate on in the comment section. Please like and subscribe. Hit that like button definitely so it can move my videos up in the algorithm of YouTube. Um, and also check the links below. Please donate to my channel and check the videos um, links that I put below related to this opening. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in our next video.